So my phone rang and it was James Gichuru. I almost dropped it. He said, "If you're free, Sam, I'll pick you up in 15 minutes for a Rotary meeting." So I ran downstairs, and for the next 15 minutes, I just stand next to the road waiting for him on Kenyatta Avenue, which was embarrassing because it was next to Siemens. Probably one of the worst bars in Nairobi at the time. And so probably you ask yourself, why would the chairman of Wananchi Online, now Zuku, and Transcentury and all these big companies be picking a 24-year-old computer repair guy from his office for a Rotary Club meeting? And the truth is that I haven't to date in my life met people who have achieved that much and who are as humble as James was, or who just didn't realize how people like me viewed him in such high regard. I was working at Wananchi, and initially James sent me to his customers that he trusted the most for me to repair their computers and install dial-ups for them. And when I was leaving Wananchi, I said, "I'd like to be mentored by your dad." I talked to Angie. I said, "I'd like to be mentored by your dad. I want to just carry his bags for meetings." And Angie says, "Just tell him, Sam." And she laughed at me. And no, for Angie, this was just dad. But for me, this was Warren Buffett. And I was just a sales guy at Wananchi. There was a bit of there's a big gap between the chairman and a salesperson. Anyway, I left Wananchi, sent James an email and said, "Hey, I'd like to join Rotary Club. Can you show me how to do this?" I have to confess, I had no interest in Rotary, despite the fact that after that email, I ended up being in the board of Rotary for 7 years, for Langata, for about 5 years, and serving for quite a while. And I went for these meetings with James, and every week after that particular email, he responded. So let me just start again. From that email, he responded to my email actually. I was quite surprised. And then we went for meetings every week. A couple of times he picked me, a couple of times he sent me directions to where the meeting would be. But that was not even the fun part. The fun part was how he'd introduce me. He'd always say, "This is Sam, he's my guest, and he's also my competitor." It was such an honor to be introduced like that by the chairman of Transcentury when I had a 200 square feet office space repairing people's computer. It gave me a lot of courage that I could be anybody in one of those rooms when I walked in. So, at the end of the meetings, we'd argue about who's paying the bill. I usually would grab the bill and pay it. That was my way of just saying thank you for spending time showing me how to do business, because during the drive to the meeting, or just right after the meeting, I'd grab 5 minutes of his time and ask him an important question about business I was going through. And he calmly would always answer. And when he was busy, he'd always say, "I'm busy right now, I'll talk to you later." He always returned my calls. When I got married, there was a rule that when the phone rang and it was James, nobody touches that phone. I'd be called, "Sam, you have a call from James," and I'd come running. So last year anyway, when Jack Ma asked me to look for people who were businessmen and who reflected the true essence of business, entrepreneurship, and mentorship, I just went across Africa looking for people that modeled the character of James Gichuru. And we ended up with some pretty amazing people. James was a great person. I mean, that statement, saying James was a great person, is an understatement, because James was one of the most influential people in our lives, the people who worked for him, both family and in business. In secret, we called him the Don.